So let's get started. We've got a great group of people, and I know more will flow in. People are sometimes delinquent on the Zoom. Officially welcoming everyone who's joining us here today. Thrilled to have the one and only Brad Cook with us from Intuitive Surgical. I'll give a brief, embarrassing bio of Brad, and then we'll get to today's agenda, which is a really exciting talk, evolving talent acquisition at Intuitive Surgical, the importance of end-to-end solutions, an end-to-end vision, and artificial intelligence enabled. Very much looking forward to the discussion. A quick about Brad, who is going to lead us today. He's the Global Vice President of Talent Acquisition at Intuitive Surgical. It's a global technology leader in minimally invasive care and a pioneer of robotic-assisted surgery. Before that, Brad was in leadership roles and executive roles at Teradata, Informatica, and Cisco. Brad's passionate about opportunities of changing the recruiting landscape and what talent acquisition will look like in the future, collaboration, knowledge sharing, and learning, especially how that all interrelates and connects to talent attraction and talent management. He's subject matter expert in the development and implementation of global TA strategies and teams. And as many on the line, I see Jerry Crispin and others will support, a very progressive thinker when it comes to recruiting technologies, and has a very non-traditional background for talent acquisition, given a prior career in sales, business operations, and then leadership at tech companies. So without further ado, we'll get started. I think, Brad, would be great if you want to give just an overview to the audience of your vision and innovation agenda at Intuitive Surgical for the TA function and the technology stack, realizing you joined the company recently, some pieces of this vision was already in play, you kind of coming in, architecting and making it your own. If you can just give an overview, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Athena. Great to be here. So I guess the vision for Intuitive probably started 7 or 8 years ago, in that at Informatica, we didn't have an ATS, a CRM, and all those things together to combine a whole lot of data. And at that stage, AI was still embryonic. It didn't really exist. APIs from a technology perspective didn't exist. But even the goal back then was to have less reliance on LinkedIn than we do today. So fast forward to today, what we have at Intuitive is an ATS that is difficult to find talent in once it's applied. We had a CRM that really wasn't being used. It had elements of profiles, but not a lot of useful profiles in there. And quite frankly, I think the gold nugget was HiredScore. And in previous instances that I built was all around having the recruiter or sourcer have access to every bit of data, no matter where it was. And we heard the comment all the time, I don't want to have to go from platform A to B to C to D and then all the way back through and copy and paste all the way through. And why I like this conversation was what HiredScore had become was the glue that glued the ATS and potentially the CRM, and then other things as we continue to grow in being able to find the talent that had already been engaged with us as a brand or had been engaged through a sourcer because they dropped them into a CRM. So I think my visions for where a tech space can go has definitely morphed over the years. And what's exciting about this, quite frankly, is technology is now catching up with the business processes where they were in the past.
Yeah. And I love kind of how you put it in, if you have glue, it unlocks you to pursue a best of breed strategy versus one solution for all. HiredScore is one piece of that, but there's a lot of other components, video interview and chatbot and scheduling bots and assessment tests and next gen tech tests. And how do you kind of think about that best of breed if and when unlocked or done the right way versus a one size fits all thinking? There's a lot of friction around cost of IT ownership, adoption and engagement with best of breed. So I'd love your experiences in that topic.
Yeah, and I think that topic for me goes back many years ago to Cisco, in that Cisco had a product called Resumex. Now, for the people who've been around for a long time would remember Resumex, but it was so customized it might as well have been a homegrown platform. When we moved off Resumex onto another platform, that was probably the point of looking for what was best in breed back in those days. And I've been around different vendors. I'm not going to name names, but I struggle with the technology that you have to be okay at everything, but not great at anything. And for me, best of breed is still the better way. Now, if you say best of breed, 5 or 7 years ago, it was harder then. You really had to have someone on staff that was really a technocrat to understand how to make these things work together. And you had to have IT involved in all that sort of stuff. But if you fast forward, even a couple of years with the onslaught of APIs, it wasn't about IT playing the glue with the vendors. It's actually the systems analyst within TA or H operations that was the glue between vendor A and vendor B. And those vendors talk a common language in an API architecture that allowed things to pass data. That for me means you don't have to sit with one size fits all, because one size fits all for a 2,000 person company versus one size fits all that's a 70,000 person company. In my book, that doesn't matter. That just doesn't make sense, because we're both going to have different requirements. When you take industry on top of that as well, a healthcare industry or a big data type company, or even previous history around data integration, the size of the company and the industry they're in are bound by different rules. And for me, best of breed plays out more so because API technologies allowed that and has enabled that for us.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I think also the definition of integration and the bar for what's a good integration, what's a bad integration. We might not have had differentiation back then. It just integrates. And now we hear a lot of questions: speed of syncing, quality of syncing, auto recovery, the next gen integration logics.
Yeah, and it's it used to be just the one way. I can drop data into something else. Great. Well, now I want statuses to go both ways. I want two-way integration. I want near real time if I can't have it real time, but near real time. And I think that's allowed a lot of tech stack vendors to come in and start adding a lot more value much faster, because they can migrate the two. The UIs, I'd probably say, are the areas that we still need to work on, of how something looks embedded within some other application that may not be native. But I think, with Chrome extensions and stuff like that, anybody can have anything at their fingertips now versus they couldn't before.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah.
Question for you, Brad. How do you go about getting the business to buy in and support your vision for transforming these functions? Feel free to share whether it's Intuitive, Informatica, Cisco, at any of the places you've been. What's kind of worked best in reinvigorating the TA function?
The point around that is really the end goal. We're in recruiting. The end goal is to put a butt in a seat. That's why we're here. How we do it is then the business value that we give back to the organization. And that's how I've always made sure I've had support of the business, is by how fast, how lower cost, whatever metrics we want to do, is how do I get that delivery to the business faster, better quality, lower cost than ever before. And all of the integrations that we've done over the years, it's all been about how do we take time out of the system? How do we get that talent in front of them? I haven't done the math here, but at Cisco, we had a number of $20,000 a day for not having a sales rep in a seat. Now, if it was product development, that was 10x that, $200,000 per day potential lost opportunity. Even at Teradata did the math backwards to say, if we took 30 days out of the time to fill, that would equate to $24 million back to one region in opportunity to go and sell faster and more often, quicker. So I always go back to what the business goal is. And that for me is putting a butt in a seat. And everything we do is about how do we make that process better all the way through.
Yeah, I love it. Speaking the dollars and cents. And then the question there is, after these investments, how do you think about measuring the results, recruiter scorecards? I know you're a staunch adoption and engager driver versus kind of letting it happen on its own. So if you can talk a little bit about, once you choose your stack, how do you think about incorporating recruiter metric scorecards and then the measurements to show it's having that desired business impact?
If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And to say that we come out live with something day one as perfect is never going to happen. But day one, we come out with a hypothesis that we then start to prove with the data. I go back to my old boss at Cisco, Don McLaughlin, manufacturing. Someone in manufacturing coming into recruiting, we thought, what are we going to learn from a manufacturing guy? And it was all about, you can't measure it, you can't fix it. And we measured a lot of things back then. And even I'd look at my days at Informatica and Teradata, we probably measured too many things, but that gave us insight into every part of the business to know what were the areas of the business or the process we could improve on. So I'm a big advocate of accountability all the way through, accountability of the technology to deliver what it needs to, accountability of the process to enable the accountability of the recruiter and sourcer. Everybody wants to be successful. And I don't just see measurements as a stick. They're the carrot. It's helping us highlight where can we improve more. Using an Anthony Robbins, constant never-ending improvement. That's the goal for me of the metrics, to say, okay, we are viewpoints to the right and up versus yesterday.
Yeah. So from vision to results, I think some of the best practices or non-obvious things you've found in bringing these ecosystems and transformations to life on the ground.
Yep, absolutely.
So one of the things you talk about is talk, listen, to learn, synthesize, plan, execute, repeat. How do you think about your kind of generals on the ground that help you get these results? One thing to have a vision, one thing to pick the tools. What's the role of recruiting managers, of SMEs, of the recruiters themselves in knowing what they're using it and why? I think that'd be great to hear more about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just delivered a presentation on my team around treating a TA transformation like getting to Everest. You don't just decide one day to walk out the door and go, I'm going to get to the summit of Everest. It takes planning. It takes a lot of work to even decide to want to go. Then when you decide to get to Kathmandu, there's still a lot of other things you've got to do. And I liken the analogy of getting to Everest summit, you've got to go through multiple different camps. And to climb a summit, you just don't decide to go walk on your own. You need your guides, you need your porters, you need a whole lot of infrastructure around you, your HR peers, your TA leadership to share that vision. And that's what I think everybody plays different parts of the journey. If I think about TA leadership, they focus around understanding what is going on in their organizations, understand what the problems are that the recruiters may be having, bringing them back, readjust. They focus around metrics to know, are the recruiters focusing on the right things? Have they got obstacles in their way? Compensation always comes up as issues that we have. Market dynamics with COVID is another one. So I think the way I look at it is every person has a position to play in the journey. Metrics aid knowing each party where to spend more energy to try and fix something. Because as I said, I'm not a big advocate of saying let's benchmark against person A, person B, because no rec is equal. One person may be doing a high volume position, one may be doing an ML or AI algorithms. They are two different requisitions. So even comparing and contrasting it as a team doesn't make sense. It's making everybody accountable for their own journey and their own metrics around that, I think, is how you move the needle forward one step at a time.
Yeah. It's great. For those listening in, you can contact Brad. He does literally have a How We Get to Everest presentation that is delightful. Maybe he'll share it with you. Question for you in choosing partners, vendors that support you on that journey. I think you have everything from the big behemoths where you might not be so special to, you know, smaller companies or next gen companies, and kind of how do you look at that ecosystem of partners, big and small, and what's that right formula for what to expect and how to get the most value out of them and partner in them the best way?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me, I always come back to saying, you know, smaller vendors are hungry, but I don't think it's about the hunger. It's the willingness to listen and the willingness to explore. If I think about the best partnerships I've had in the TA tech space, it's because none of us had the answer, but each of us has a piece of the puzzle. And vendors, you know, such as yourself, you know, saying here's a business problem, you've come out with a solution. That's a partnership. I haven't felt that in large environments where, you know, a little fish in a big pond, which probably comes back to my whole belief of best of breed versus one size fits all. But I think it always comes down to the willingness of both parties to listen and the willingness of both parties to be able to go in and realize that, you know, we're trying to solve a business problem and both coming at it from different angles, and we both have the solution at the other end. I think that's what today makes the vendors of tomorrow, is because they don't believe they have the solution that's going to solve for everybody. I think there's multiple vendors that come together that create the overall solution that actually does solve an industry problem. And that is getting butts in seat faster.
And I think that's actually something you and some of the innovators we work with really well. You almost, whether we have a natural alliance with these partners or we have an alliance because Intuitive wants us to have an alliance, but really thinking data handoff points, end user handoff points, converge metrics. So maybe just sharing, how do you make sure everyone's not siloed and everyone's marching together, connecting vendors together, asking them how they'll integrate for your vision, for example?
I'm going to keep coming back to the same broken record, and that is data and metrics. If we don't have a clear understanding of a handoff, you know, there's an activity or there's an input, there's an activity, there's a result, and every technology does one of those three steps. And if I think about the metrics at different layers, a sourcing metric is going to be different than a recruiter metric. But for me, it all boils down to how do we get the talent in front of the business at the right place at the right time and at the right cost. And everybody today can be found, but not everybody can be engaged. And when there's vendor handoffs at certain points, we can prove those with data to show whether it's working or not. You know, when you start looking at a time to fill, let's call it, you know, a 60-day time to fill. If we can take the time to present down from, you know, 14 days down to 5, and I've already thrown the challenge out, let's get it down to 20 minutes. You know, that's how we can take a lot of value back to the business, and each vendor plays a different part of that journey at that time. And some of it, I think, in the beginning comes with a gut feel, a hypothesis saying, I think we can move this forward. And if you can't measure it right out of the gate, you test it until you can, and then you either you keep it, kill it, or blow it up.
I love it. Great. So let's shift for a second. You have a very clear vision for recruiter of the future. How do you think about and this technology stack and the automation and the augmentation? Really, in so many ways, as you say, it's just the vehicle we're choosing to drive in to get to that vision. How would you articulate what the recruiter of the future, what work they do, what work they don't do, and how that ultimately impacts the business results of a company like Intuitive?
Yeah, I think recruiters and sources today more than ever, and I think it continues to be that way, have a tough job, because they've got to continuously reinvent themselves. You know, if we think about, you know, the recruiter of 10 or 15 years ago, it was very much about a relationship-driven model. You know, you in touch with your Rolodex, and you always made sure you knew when they were ready to move. Fast forward to today, you're not just the relationship builder, you're now also the marketer. Now you've also got to be the technologist. Now you've got to understand the tech stack completely. So recruiters and sources, I guess all at TA have got to continue to morph their skills. And I think natural curiosity is a very big competency of a recruiter for tomorrow. And it's like, a grandmother learning about what Instagram is or what Snapchat is. Everybody's got to continuously learn of how do I use the tool like a Swiss Army knife. There is more tools these days than we can poke a stick at. But I still come back to the Swiss Army knife is, if everything looks like a nail, you're only going to use a hammer. Well, not every role we have is a hammer. We have to use different elements of the Swiss Army knife. And I think for recruiters, it's how do they understand which tool is going to solve their problem the fastest, and if it doesn't, then try something else. So I think everybody sort of talks about is AI going to replace the recruiter? The answer is no. This is a human game, and I think that's maybe a lot longer than I'll be in the marketplace. But it's just about how do we leverage what we already have today to find people, to attract them, to nurture them, to bring them into the company, and then let them go as an employee to then do the best work they've ever done within the culture that they're in. So it is a tough environment for recruiters these days, and I think things get thrown at them every day that's different, and it's about learning to be able to juggle those different things, but knowing which tool's the right one for the job.
Yeah, great. We actually have a question from the audience on how do you see TA being a part of the team? What does that relationship look like with the rest of the company and those that support TA in an ideal? It's structure, technology, R&R, and metrics, right?
Yeah. TA is one element of support for a whole organization, and there's multiple other areas within HR as well, just like finance. So there's a couple of really critical relationships that I see in any organization. There's quite frankly, there's four of them. Recruiting and finance have to be lockstep. Recruiting and finance and business have to be lockstep. But then you go and throw marketing on top of that. Those are the four primary criteria of a successful talent acquisition if those parties are all engaged to the common goal. Having a relationship with finance, understands where we're going to go as a company, and we all struggle we get to the end of the year and we all sit back and say, what are we going to hire for next year? And everybody was always waiting. But having those deep relationships with finance, well, you may be able to get 80-20. If you've got 80% guidance of where you're going to go, well, now you can start to mobilize your workforce in what location, what roles. You can start to mobilize sourcing. It might be 10 roles, it might be 5, but you've still got a good directional area where to go. Marketing, when it comes back to brand and connection of the company, is a critical element there. And the business needs, if there's a certain area that I think the team is doing a great job at Intuitive is being close to our client groups and understanding what they need, not just for today, but always asking of what they're going to want for tomorrow. Do I think any company has true workforce planning out there nailed down? No, I think that's still utopia. But it doesn't stop us from at least asking the direction of where we want to go. Having a strong sourcing infrastructure in place can allow us to pivot into different directions based on the business needs that literally can change overnight. I think we would have been having different conversations today if we weren't in a COVID world. And COVID has been negative on one hand and positive on another, because it's actually opened up a lot of people's thinking to us as a community, opening up our talent pool for much broader opportunities than we did before. So, I'm always looking for the silver lining in everything. And I think the connectivity of TA to the business now has allowed us to look at talent where we wouldn't have naturally looked at it before.
Yeah, it's a great question. How do you think COVID has changed the relationship of the recruiters when the recruiters are doing the jobs that they have for good across the business? Is it they're more dependent upon for critical for revenue roles? They're more dependent upon as where's the best place to get this talent because we won't get a lot more headcount. How do you see that shift?
It's an interesting question, and it's one that for me, I'm always looking for the silver. Is there a silver bullet in everything we do? And I get a similar question often around how has things changed with COVID, but I think at the brass roots, what we do hasn't changed with COVID. We've added an empathy layer, absolutely, because there's a lot of people struggling with this in the world. And I think recruiters spend more time storytelling and I guess displaying what the culture's like through words than having the ability to come in and see an office and meet people and stuff like that. You know, I've been asked the question of what's it like starting a company in the middle of COVID? Well, I was in the office 5 days before we went into lockdown. And quite frankly, I think within the 7 months that I've been here, I've been able to create deeper bonds and deeper connections with the business during COVID. And someone said, why? It's because I have a captive audience. Everybody that I need to get a hold of is on the other end of a screen now versus being on a plane, being on the other side of the world, being somewhere with a client. So again, we use those to our advantage and we'll make the world a better place. But I think, yeah, it comes back to the basics of the fundamentals. We've got to do what we've always done is being close to the people that want to work for the company, or those that don't know us yet. How do we spend a little bit more time educating them on what we do? So I think the basics are there. We just got to over index on how do we bring people into the storyline.
Yeah. Well, I think it translates to you really more than anyone thinking about the end-to-end ecosystem, right? From first contact or relationship for now or later, and that nurture, and that at the right point in time for the candidate and intuitive, and when it's no longer the right point for that employee, letting them go and maybe have them come back. Technology to enable that fluidity. And how do you think about the messaging of that fluidity to other TA leaders and maybe executives that think maybe more old world than 21st century TA, right?
I'm not sure I can answer that question because I don't think like an old world TA leader. That's a hard one. But I think you have to look at things end to end and you have to break down every component. If, quite frankly, intuitive is the best kept secret in the marketplace. Like, no one knows what the culture is like until you're really in the culture and understand what it can do. So part of that is like, how do we now amplify the work that we do internally that saves a lot of people's lives out to the outside world? That is now going to use someone's words the other day, compel or repel. That's going to compel people to say, jump onto the mission and jump in, or repel people. You know, that's not for me. I want to go and build a new search engine, whatever it happens to be. But those aspects all the way through, you've got to nail down every part of the process, because if you don't, I don't know how you're going to succeed. I'm not sure how to do that because I've always been innovative, and it's probably just my Cisco days. Is everything's about technology and how do you enable things through technology to get more productivity out of the teams now. And I think there's a point of diminishing returns where you just can't throw bodies at things. You've got to think differently. I'll go back to a story years ago when I was in sales as a manager. We just come off a killer year. We're like 150% of quota. The manager said, okay, we're going to give you another 150% quota increase. And it was all about, well, okay, how many extra heads do I get? He went, 0. You know, when you back someone into a corner that say you need to come out with a big target, you've got to stop and think differently. And out of that spurred a whole lot of different thinking at Cisco that we killed the number again. And that's when I got out of sales, because there's only so many times you can do that. But I've always used that analogy that when you get in a corner, you're stuck. So you can't just come out with the same paradigms that everybody's used. You've got to look at things out of the box to see what other opportunities are there. And I think the first opportunity that hits us is not always the best one. At least always look for 2 more. You may find the first one was the better idea, but looking for multiple solutions has always been the way that, I think it's a function that teams have always been more successful.
Yeah. And I guess to that, how do you think about augment, automate, arm with data or analytics, but keep the automation or keep the augmentation either for later or until you have more data quality or until you have more clarity? Do you break things down in that way?
I probably haven't gone to that far of augmentation. I believe in setting a hypothesis and then proving it or disproving it. And then the data and the measurements help figure out where we can focus next. And over time, yeah, maybe we can augment. We've just done some work with some internal chatbots that help us automate a process, so a coordinator's not sitting there cutting and pasting all these times. So right. Using different RPA technologies as a way that we're augmenting the human being, but that probably come out of a gut feel of a need versus, we hear everybody complaining that coordination is still one of the biggest challenges we have as an industry. So let's see if we can fix some parts of this versus having to fix it all in one go.
Yep. Break it all down, study the data, see what's working, and
eat the animal one bite at a time.
I love that. Question from the audience. It's a great point. Your leadership style, Brad, in running these highly driven, metrics oriented, success oriented teams. I think among the few TA leaders that have built this, these types of teams and succeeded in achieving these metrics at every one of the orgs you've been through. So how do you define your leadership style and leadership?
I could probably throw that out to my old teams. They might have a different opinion, but it's always, for me, I won't ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. I'll sit in a room talking 10,000 feet and be willing to sit with someone. Let's talk about field level definitions of what are we going to put in a new process. And that's, I guess, always been my leadership style, is to always push the boundary, know where the edge is, so you don't break people along the way. I've certainly learned those mistakes myself. But I guess I also have a leadership of I don't want to have people think we can be complacent. I think the market changes and morphs literally every month, or at least every quarter. We have to be keeping up with that. So just because a process worked a year ago doesn't mean it's going to work now. And I think the leadership has always been, what's the win-win-win? How do we win the business, TA, the organization, to keep the ball moving forward?
That's great.
My teams may have a different view of my leadership style, but I think I've calmed down a little bit over the years.
Another great question, which is, how does your team leverage technology? What's in the stack for a strong candidate experience, knowing that you guys do build important technologies? Those that know it know that it saves lives. The demand and the passion and fervor for intuitive is probably very strong for those in the know. As you said, the best kept secret, but secret's a bit out of the bag. So how do you think about that candidate experience, the technology and the processes, to make sure, even if the answer is no, you're doing that as humanly as possible?
It's an interesting question. For me, the technology has to enable the user experience. So if you start all the way from a career site, the career site for me is the center of the universe. Everything we do as a TA practitioner is to cast a wide net and bring people around the sun. And the sun is the career site. So if we're doing programmatic ad buys, it's about creating awareness of who we are, either for the job or have someone now come back to the sun and now learn about culture, learn about that. If we do send outbound messaging, how do we bring them back? How do we get them to engage with a chatbot? If I can't talk to someone live, let me talk to our new chatbot will be launched in a little while, Mona Lisa. We have Da Vinci as our robots. We're going to have Mona Lisa as our chatbot, and come and have a talk to her about what is the culture like? What are the jobs that may be an opportunity for them? And I think looking, again, that first part of awareness creation, there's a lot of technology that can allow us to do that. The texting capabilities of platforms today, that gets everybody here. They now apply to a job. Great, we've now got that candidate in our system. Or if they're a passive lead, they're in a CRM. How do we then rediscover those in the future? All of those things just to that point there to get us to the point of time to present. That is all technology that's driven the speed of that. You couldn't do that if you had to go through a Rolodex like you did many years ago, because you literally couldn't have that many relationships where you have them at your fingertips. So yeah, I think those few examples, just getting up to time to slate or time to present, is how technology has enabled better candidates through the mix, because they're more aware of what the company does, and in a faster time frame to at least calibrate with the manager. If I think about how things like Fetch, and I'd say, Fetch is still early days for us. That was one of the great things walking in the door, is HiredScore was already connected with Taleo. So that now helped mask the challenges of finding talent within Taleo. So now that those bubble to the surface. There was a connection to the CRM, but there wasn't a lot of profiles for Fetch to be able to pull out. What I'm excited over the next couple of months, we'll be going live with our new career site, with our new CRM, and having HiredScore be able to pull into, so now you've got a virtual data lake of active appliers sitting in an ATS, passive candidates or prospects and leads sitting in the CRM, and now having visibility of all of them at your fingertips. Now then having the ability to now go and do text messages to engage them, to bring them back to the sun, to now warm themselves with the information on the career site. Those things all blend together. So I guess they're just a few of the analogies of how the technology enables every step of the process, and always be trying to bring people back to the sun.
Yeah. You and some of our other most innovative keep giving us the challenge. How do we get one day, time to slate, time to present? If you think about my lake and everything I've got in there, why isn't everything the same day? So we should build a forum of you guys, and I see some of them on this call.
Yeah.
We
had an analogy years ago called jobs find you. We were trying to get jobs find you, which theoretically, if a requisition is opened in a system, you already know what the talent is, and you know what the job description is. The job should be able to find you. So the technology is there today that theoretically can enable that. Let's see how fast we can get there.
Fetch is signed up and raising its hand. Two more questions, and this has been so great. It's always such a pleasure to spend time with you, and the audience. You're doing a great job of asking questions. If you have any other, put them in the chat. We will try to get to one more. This is kind of our firing round. Most pressing item you feel is not being tackled well enough or done well enough today that is critical for the go forward?
I think about data not being able to be used to tell the story to fix something. If I think about your question before about where recruiters go and what the future of recruiter, it's also one thing I didn't add back then is the true talent advisor, of leveraging information and insights to educate your hiring manager about what the talent landscape looks like. So I think the ability globally to arm recruiters and sources, to arm hiring managers about what is actually available, I think that's still the area that's still early days. We have LinkedIn Insights, and we have Claro and a few other tools out there that are starting to enable that. But that's also a new muscle for, I think, a lot of people to get through. And it's not just about throwing out a PDF of here's a whole lot of information, because there's a lot of information. But I think it's about how do we educate recruiters and sources and TA leaders to be able to tell the story of what the insights are telling. A great example was previous company. We wanted to hire 30 inside sales reps in a location. When we looked at that location, there were 75 people in that location that had a skill set. Well, you want 30 of the 75, and there was already 40 of them had already moved in the last 12 months. So the likely opportunity to displace them, that's lower. When we actually came at that from a story perspective with the data, and then showed them where else they could go, the data started opening up their minds, and then they did a split system. Okay, let's do half here and half there. And I think that's the big thing for me is, I think a lot of us, and I'm included, we do rinse, wash, and repeat. We've seen certain things work in every industry. I'd say 80-20 80% of what we do is the same. 20% will be different for the industry or the organization, different strategies and tactics. But the underlying data to tell the story, to guide us where we need to go, I think is still the hard part. That's still the utopia. Yeah,
that's next.
And I'll probably not be satisfied that we'll get there, but because then there'll always be something different. But no, that's the constant never-ending improvement. How do we always be looking for what's next?
Amazing. And we do have a question from the audience. Have you actually climbed Everest, or is that just a great analogy?
I didn't climb Everest. I got to base camp. So I got to 18,500 feet.
Good enough. Good enough for everyone.
That was enough for me. That was enough for me.
Well, Brad, it's such a pleasure to have you. I'm so excited to see, I think, company after company, you reinvent and innovate on the vision and make the industry, actually all of us, even vendors that get to work with you, better off and trued up to the future. So thank you for joining us today. A pleasure to have you. Thank you to all of our attendees and guests. And Brad, I assume you can be reached either by LinkedIn or Twitter, social media, for anyone who has follow-up questions.
Yep, absolutely. And just want to thank you for the great partnership. You and your team have really helped us accelerate.
Awesome, a pleasure.
So thank you.
Well, have a wonderful Tuesday, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to more HR transformation stories in the weeks ahead. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.